welcome to Economics with Uplift Education and Miss Williams. My name is Miss Williams, and today we will be talking about demand. And when we talk about demand, we talk about how the consumer influences how I make my money. And as a special shout out today to the 2020 seniors, woo! We are going to put our senior sashes on because we all look forward to walking across that stage, and we are not going to let a coronavirus stop us. We are not going to let them stop us from celebrating our 2020 seniors because guess what? They worked for it. Anyhow, back on our instruction for demand for today. So we're talking about the law of demand. And when we talk about the law of demand states that as price increases, demand decreases. So as the price goes up, demand goes down. And as the price goes down, demand goes up. What I like to do when I'm teaching demand is when I have my students, I try to teach them to create this diagram on their assignments. And on this diagram, make sure that you put it in the top right hand, left hand corner, wherever you can squeeze it in to remind you of that principle that as price goes up, demand goes up. Demand goes down, and as price goes down, demand goes up. Whatever one does, the opposite does the opposite. So whatever price does, when price goes up, demand goes down, and whenever demand goes down, price goes up. Whatever one does, the other one does the exact opposite. Pretty much, right? So we're talking about demand curves. And when we talk about demand curves, a demand curve is a graph that illustrates the demand for a product. It shows how much a consumer desire for the product changes as the price changes. For example, if I have a pack of gum, if you sell me the pack of gum for 50 cents, my desire might be a little bit more to purchase that pack of gum, as opposed to if you tell me that that pack of gum is now $2. Then maybe I'm not so interested in that same pack of gum. And that's what we're tracking when we look at the demand curve. So when we take a look at the demand curve, we're looking at the demand schedule. And the demand schedule is a chart that tells us how we're going to plot the quantity demanded versus the price. When we take a look at the next slide and we look at the curve illustrates the quantities of apple juice demanded at each price of all consumers on the market. So when we take a look at this chart, it shows us the price values at each one. So at 75 cents, we were able to sell 800 units, and at $1, 650 units, at $1.25, 500 units at $1.50. It was 350 units at $1.75. We sold 200 units, and at $2, we sold 50 units. This model does follow the law of demand because as the price increases or as the price goes up, the demand or the number on the quantity actually decreases down to 50 units. But that's not all that we see. So if we take a look here, we're looking at how the chart is set up as well. So when we take a look at the setup, in order to read the chart to effectively be able to determine information as far as the market demand curve is, we have to make sure that it's set up properly. So when we're looking at this schedule or at the curve, we must set up our curve so that it is increasing in value from low to high on the price side. The price side is found to the left of your chart. And to the left of your chart, you'll see that the price is increasing from low to high, going upward from bottom to top. And then you will see that your demand quantity is increasing from your left to your right, and with your low being towards the axis and the high going outward or going towards your right. So anytime you see an increase, you'll see that your curve will move to the right, and anytime you see a decrease, you'll see that your curve will move to your left. Elasticity of demand. So when we talk about elasticity of demand, we're talking about the degree to which changes in price causes a change in demand. If we change the price, will the demand change a little or a lot is the major question that we're looking to answer. So when we talk about elastic demand, if demand for a good is very sensitive to a change in price, then the demand is elastic. Pretty much saying that if the price changes a little bit, the demand will change a lot, kind of like with that pack of gum. If gum went from 50 cents to 75 cents, we would see a different shift in demand because people were used to paying 50 cents for that pack of gum. And at that point, they felt like the gum was worth 50 cents. But what happens when the gum changes to 75 cents? Is it still worth the purchase? And that's what we're looking at. The example given was the example of elastic demand, and we talked about pizza. As the price of pizza goes up even a little bit, the demand goes down. This is seen quite often, and we see this quite often when we see marketing for different pizza companies. For example, Little Caesars Pizza had the $5 hot and ready pizza, and then they rolled out a $6 extra most bestest pizza. But they never got rid of the $5 pizza. Why? Because demand would slightly change. People were used to purchasing that pizza at $5 per pizza. And if they go to Pizza Patron or another competitor that offers that $5 pizza, they still have to be able to compete. Therefore, you see that, yes, they have a $6 extra most bestest, but they do not deviate from the $5 pizza because they're noticing that as the price changes, people are less or more likely to purchase based on that small change in price. So next we're going to take a look at what an elastic demand curve looks like for pizza. An elastic demand curve for pizza is a flat curve because it consistently decreases at the same rate. Whenever we see a demand curve will always have a downward slope because as price decreases, the demand will increase and vice versa. So therefore, when we're looking at the demand curve here, we can see that it is traveling at a downward slope at a constant rate or a constant speed. That constant rate or constant speed indicates that the demand is elastic and that the curve is flat because it is constant or it is moving at a standard rate, either and as far as decreasing for the pizza. Inelastic demand continued. Demand for a good that consumers will continue to buy despite a price increase is considered inelastic. Inelastic. So let's go back to elastic and let's compare and contrast elastic versus inelastic. When I teach this, I try to teach this to my students when we talk about your pants, right? So when you have on a pair of sweatpants, the band is elastic. It stretches. It gives you flexibility. You don't necessarily have to wear the pants tight and you don't have to wear them loose, but it gives you the ability to stretch those pants. Whenever you're dealing with a product or a service that you don't necessarily have to have, it's not a necessity. You can budge on it or you can say, I could get it this week or maybe I'll just wait for it. That's something that typically is elastic in demand. So therefore, if the price changes even just a little bit, you'll be like, you know what? It was cheaper the last time I saw it. I'm not going to get it this time. However, when we talk about something being inelastic, it's more like that pair of Levi's jeans that you go to the mall and try on. Those Levi's jeans have very little, if no stretch in those jeans. And if you fit them, you fit them. And if you don't, you don't. Same with inelastic demand. In inelastic demand, it doesn't matter whether the price goes up a little or a lot. People are still going to buy the item. An example of inelastic demand would be soap. Right now, during the coronavirus, soap is in inelastic demand. People need soap to keep their hands clean, to keep their personal hygiene together, and to stay healthy throughout this entire debacle with the coronavirus. People use soap as a personal hygiene item to assure that they are just maintaining personal hygiene health so that no one has an issue with sitting next to their desk mate. Just kidding. So when we talk about elastic demand is something or an item that if the price goes up a little or a lot, it's going to impact the demand a lot. Whereas when something is inelastic, it's something you can't budge on, like toilet paper. That was good, wasn't it? Like toilet paper, something that you must have and you can't budge on. You can't live life without it because you have to be able to go to the restroom, right? It is a bodily function. It is something that you need. Therefore, whenever it is inelastic, it provides a need that regardless of whether the price goes up or goes down, people will purchase it. When we talk about if a good is sensitive to elasticity in price, if the price changes a little bit, then the demand will change a lot. Another example of elastic demand would be hot chips, Takis, Cheetos, things like that. Those are products that we wouldn't necessarily purchase if we were starving, but we would get them in the event that we had a few extra dollars. So, what does elastic demand look like for soap? Because we know that no matter if the price changes a little bit or a lot, it's not going to be a flat curve, right? Definitely not. It's actually going to be more of a steep curve. And if you take a look at this diagram, I've circled it to show you where the curve drops off rather quickly. And if we take a look at the price goes from $3 to $1. So there was a huge drop in price. But as you can see, there was only about a 10,000 unit change in demand. Not a lot, right? That's because this product is inelastic. No matter how much soap goes up or no matter how much soap goes down, you'll see that either way it goes, the demand changes very little. And we see the change in demand at the quantity demanded. Remember, when we set up that chart, we want to make sure our price is to the left and our quantity demanded is at the bottom. So when we look at the quantity demanded, as far as inelastic demand, we'll see that it's a very small shift. We're looking at the transition between 30 units and 40 units. And we're looking at what's happening here. We're looking at the transition between about 35 units and 45 units to 50 units. So here we're looking that our units are about 35,000 units. And even though the price dropped by $2, we saw that it only changed the demand by about 5,000 units, which isn't a lot. It's a very small change considering how much we dropped the price in order to impact sales and in order to impact production. So when we talk about factors affecting elasticity, several different factors can affect the elasticity of demand for a certain good. And the first thing is the availability of substitutes. If there are a few substitutes for a good, the price demanded will likely not decrease as the price increases, which means it is inelastic. The opposite, meaning that there are lots of substitute, is usually true in an elastic situation. For an example, when we talk about things that we can't go without, one of them is gasoline. There's no substitute for gas. It's a natural resource, so it is inelastic. However, McDonald's has multiple substitutes, which makes it elastic. I cannot go anywhere and just get gas. I can't go to my cousin's house and say, hey, I need gas. No, it's a very limited resource. There are no substitutes for gas. I can't say, hey, let me get some of your vegetable oil and put that in my car and see if it goes. It's not going to work. However, if I say I want a burger, I can get that burger from McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, In-N-Out. I have so many different options, and that's what makes it elastic, the availability of additional substitutes from which I can purchase the product or the service. Factors affect elasticity continue. When we talk about relative importance is another factor determining elasticity of demand and how much of your budget you are willing to spend on that good. For example, mortgage and rent payments are inelastic. It provides shelter. It is a basic human necessity. You have to have shelter in order to survive. Whereas movies or going out to a theme park or hanging out with your friends at Dave & Buster's, those are all elastic. Those are all entertainment factors. You have to have a place to live. You can't budge on that. But what you can choose to pass on is your entertainment. What's important to the person is what's going to determine how much of their budget they're willing to spend. Because living or having a place to live is so important to the survival of a human being, majority of the budget would be okay being allocated towards housing. Whereas I wouldn't necessarily spend half to 3/4 of my paycheck on going to the movies or hanging out if I hadn't taken care of my living situations already. Which brings us to necessities versus luxuries. When we talk about necessities versus luxuries, we're talking about whether a person considers a good to be a necessity or a luxury and has a great impact on the good's elasticity of demand for that person. For example, Food. Food is inelastic. It's something that we have to have in order to survive. It provides nutrients, it gives us energy, and allows us to keep us moving. However, jewelry, such as this necklace, wouldn't necessarily help me in any way, shape, or form. It is elastic, it is optional, and I don't need it to survive. So necessities versus luxuries will also be a huge factor that affects elasticity as far as demand. The next factor we're looking at is change over time. Demand sometimes becomes more elastic over time because people can eventually find their substitutes. An example of this is Blockbuster. I know, my age is showing. Blockbuster used to be the only place where you could rent videos, which made it inelastic. At the point where Netflix, videos on demand, pay-per-view, and Redbox came out, these became substitutes for Blockbuster. So whenever you were looking to rent a movie, Blockbuster was no longer inelastic because you had new substitutes that you could choose from in order to rent or to watch those same exact videos. A demand curve is only accurate as long as there are no changes other than price that could affect the consumer's decision. The only thing that can affect a demand curve and it still be accurate is price. When factors other than price or non-price factors affect the demand curve, the entire curve either shifts to the left or it either shifts to the right. These factors will cause the demand curve to shift left if there is less quantity demanded or you see a loss, or to the right if you see more quantity demanded or if you see a growth. So let's take a look at Farley High School and see what happened to their hockey program as far as elasticity of demand is concerned. So recently, Farley High School changed boys hockey from a varsity sport to an intramural sport. Let's stop there. When we talk about varsity sports are sports that are engineered or supported by school districts that allow students to receive certain benefits, such as being recruited from colleges, as well as allowing them to letter as a varsity athlete, and it gives them certain accolades. Whereas intramural sports are more like free play. These are the sports that they conduct after school so that you're not bored, but you don't really get any recognition for it. So, when we're talking about growth or loss, we're looking at the Farley High School, it says, as a result, they needed to buy fewer hockey pucks. The decrease in demand is shown by a shifting on the demand curve. Shiftings on the demand curve. Let's talk about what that looks like. Remember, whenever it is a positive shift or if there is growth, it's going to shift outward. And whenever there's a loss, it's going to shift inward. I try to explain this as the pregnant lady concept when I teach my students about how the demand curve moves. Whenever a pregnant lady has her belly, and I know I'm sorry, I'm a horrible artist, but hey, if you can do better, I'll take any suggestions that you have. So when we look at the pregnant lady, as the pregnant woman's baby is growing inside of her belly, or if there is a positive change to the pregnant lady, her belly will move outward. Anytime it moves outward from the point of inception or from the origin here, and it moves outward, that would be considered a growth. Anytime you see that it moves inward, it will be considered a loss, because after a woman has the baby, her tummy tends to go in, and when her tummy goes inward, that shows that she's losing weight or that she's losing the excess space that she needed to carry her baby. So when you're thinking about growth, think about that line shifting out, and when you're thinking about loss, think about it shifting in. So back to Farley High School. Let's see what happened with the non-price factor that caused the change in Farley High School's demand on hockey pucks. So if we take a look, we look at the original demand curve, which has been marked by the gold X in the top of the graph. If we see here, a lot of students clearly decided that they didn't want to play sports anymore after it changed from varsity to intramural. So we saw that there was a decrease, and as a result, we saw a decrease in the hockey pucks because there aren't as many students that are now playing hockey. It didn't have anything to do with the price of the hockey pucks, as much as it had to do with the number of people that were actually participating in the sport and whether it was needed to purchase the hockey pucks anyway. Because that curve shifted back inward or back towards the axis, we see that there was a decrease in the demand and we saw the shift go inward. So you see from the original line going inward that there was a decrease in demand for the hockey pucks. Another factor could be change in income. As people earn more money, the demand for luxury goods will increase, and as they earn less money, the demand for these goods will decrease. For an example, if I win the lottery, I'm gonna buy a Jaguar. Oh, a Jaguar or a Bentley. Oh, a Bentley. I can have a Bentley. I can have a Bentley if I won the lottery. However, if I lose my job or if I get laid off, I might find myself on the dart taking the bus because when I had extra money, I had the money to spend. However, when I lost my job, I didn't have that money to spend anymore and I had to become more resourceful. We talked about substitutions, but let's talk about the substitution effect. If there's a substitute product, demand for an item may be influenced by the price of the substitute. For an example, if the price of butter goes up, people will substitute for margarine. This proved true for me when I was in college. When I was in college, we had hit a recession, and at that time, the price of butter had skyrocketed. But you know what didn't? The price of margarine and Country Crock. I was able to purchase Country Crock to cook all of my food, and I was just fine because it was the substitution effect. Because the price of butter went up, I found a better priced alternative, and I was able to use that. Which brings us to complementary products. When we talk about complementary products, we're talking about the demand for an item that will either increase or decrease if the price of a complementary product or the product that goes with it increases or decreases. For example, if the price of hot dogs goes up, the demand for hot dogs goes down, thereby decreasing the demand for hot dog buns. So, if the price of hot dogs goes up, the demand for hot dogs goes down and it decreases the hot dog buns. Because if you don't want or need hot dogs, then do you really want or need hot dog buns? Not exactly. Which is how the complementary products work. Same with peanut butter and jelly. If the price of peanut butter goes up, the demand for peanut butter goes down, which says in the complementary products theory says that therefore by decreasing the demand for the peanut butter, the demand for the jelly would decrease as well. And last but not least, we're going to look at a change in attitude. As people's attitudes about products change, so does the demand. We see this a lot in fashion, food, and music when we talk about trends. Like keto. Keto is huge right now, but if people's attitudes towards keto change, the demand for products related to the keto diet will decrease. Also, let's look at fashion. Back in the day, Champion were some of the coolest warm-up suits that you could wear. You had your Champion, you had Fila, you had Adidas. All of these warm-up suits were amazing. It was all about comfort and athletic ability, looking like you were the most athletic person with the matching shoes, of course. However, as time passed, some of these same brands became less popular. People's thought process or attitudes towards these brands changed and they stopped purchasing them. The demand went down and manufacturing slowed on those goods. However, as time evolves, we notice that things from the past come back and they actually end up being a little bit cooler than they were before, and people end up taking more interest or their attitude changes towards them again and they want to purchase them again. At that point, we see the demand increase and we see an increase in production. So the next question is, how does scarcity affect demand? If there is scarcity of an item, the demand goes up. For example, gas during a hurricane. Everyone's going to get gas. Scarcity means that there's simply not enough of it for everyone. So if everyone goes to the gas station in the event of a hurricane, there's no gas for everyone to pump. Therefore, it creates scarcity. Gas is a natural resource and it cannot be recreated. You can't find it from anywhere else. Therefore, if the amount of gas disappears, everybody's going to want it, which means that the demand goes up. So scarcity does affect demand in that aspect. But when we talk about scarcity, we talk about it not being enough. But what if there is enough? We're just not buying it. That's where we're looking at how does a boycott affect demand? If an item is being boycotted, there's little or no demand for the item. An example of this is during the Montgomery bus boycott. There was little or no demand for the Montgomery bus system. The people of the city decided that since they weren't allowed to sit in the front of the bus with their counterparts, they decided that they weren't going to support the bus system at all, meaning they weren't going to pay to ride the buses. Instead, they got together as a community. They found people who had cars, and they engineered their own ride-sharing system, be it by taxi cab or by commuting as groups in order to get to where they needed to go, so that they could negatively impact the bus system financially by boycotting or refraining or stopping purchasing those items in an effort to hurt the company. We saw this also after the CEO of Papa John's made some negative comments towards the NFL. Some people felt strongly about that and decided, hey, well, since your CEO feels so strongly about this, we're going to boycott Papa John's, and they stopped buying the pizza. It hit the company so hard, they ended up letting go of the CEO of Papa John's. So it goes to show that boycott is a huge way to impact the economy, but definitely a huge way to impact demand and productivity. So the last thing we're going to look at is how does the war in the Middle East affect demand? Because we know that it has been an ongoing issue with the United States, seeing that the war in the Middle East has impacted economies all over the world, but especially ours. So the first thing is that we will see an increased demand for war-related resources such as metal to make bullets and vehicles, cloth for uniforms and gas masks. And we would see an increased demand for news because people would want to see more of what's happening in the world so that they're more aware or prepared for what they need to do next. This example includes news interruptions during television shows, news stations, and internet sites. It's gearing towards what the people want. The people are going to demand that war-related resources are produced so that we're able to protect the people on the home front, be it making those metal items, those cloth items, or those gas masks. They're also going to want to demand an increase in news because they want to check on their family members if they're in the armed services, or they want to know what their next move should be economically or for the safety of their families. Thank you so much for tuning in today. So today we talked about demand, why demand shifts inward or outward. We talked about elasticity and inelasticity of demand and what kind of things impact elasticity or inelasticity and how the war in the Middle East could affect demand. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to reach out to your teachers. Until next time, have a great day and see you the next time we tune in for economics.